What a beautiful Sunday morning. However, be prepared, because there's a wee bit of a rant coming. And the rant is very much about white goods and consumer durables. And the fact that this morning I discovered my little larder fridge, you know, the little fridge that I have in the pantry. And it's just a little under-counter larder fridge. I mean, it's the kind of thing that most people wouldn't even be bothered with. But it has stopped working. Oh, the light still comes on, but the actual cooling component in it has stopped working. Anyway, before I get into this rant, let me have a cup of tea, because I've made myself a nice pot of tea. I've got my little bit of almond milk. Oh, let me just push that back in case it tips up. And, oh, hang on a moment, is that a little hair there? It is. I've had these cups in storage whilst I've been doing the kitchen. Look at that for a nice brew. Ah. Now, this may soften the edges of my rant. There we go. And Jack's all lined up. He says, oh, I love me mum's rants. Go on, mum, get it off your chest. Oh, that's lovely. It's so calming, you know, when you make a proper pot of tea. I absolutely abhor mugs with a tea bag and a bit of boiling water poured over the top. That's not a cup of tea. No. A cup of tea is making a pot of tea and putting it on a tray and having a cup and saucer. And the cup should always be china, because tea needs to be kept at an ambient temperature. And china does the trick. That's lovely. The birds are singing and the sun is shining. So I'm going to keep my rant very short because I'm already feeling better. Oh, that's lovely. When I first moved into this little, as it was then, ramshackle cottage back in 2004, I mean, the cottage was in such a desperate state that I had to make one room livable and get on with doing the rest. Anyway, when all was done, I thought I'll get my white goods, because at that point in time I had no work over here and I was going to be going backwards and forwards a wee bit to London to do a bit of supply teaching, just to keep my head above water financially. So I bought a small selection of white goods, a fridge being one of them. Now, just trying to think. Yeah, I think it was 2005 when I bought that fridge. So the fridge itself is, what, 12 years old? 13. It's about 12 years old. Now, when I first came to London, when I first went to London in 1972, I remember having a bedsit, and in the bedsit there was a Smeg, I think it was a Smeg fridge. You know those great big fridges with the kind of pull handle on them? And that was already kind of fairly ancient. I mean, it had been, I think it had been sourced second hand. Because in those days, you know, the landlords would just divide the house up into as many rooms as they could cram in and furnish them in a fairly, basic minimal style, and rent them out as bedsits. So the average bedsit in London had, a fridge of some kind of a little cooker, and a bed, and it was very basic, but probably more than what's on offer today, actually, in terms of availability and rent. But getting back to the fridge. So that was an old fridge, and it was still working. And when I got married in 1974, I remember going to a big kind of an auction, because that's what most people did. You went and you sourced everything, including your bed, on a pre-used second-hand basis. And people were very frightened of getting into debt and borrowing money, and plastic cards hadn't yet been invented. That was a thrill to come. So I remember again getting this massive big, it looked like one of those big American fridges, that you'd see on the movies. And to me, coming from Ireland, I mean, this was just luxury to have this massive big fridge that you could stuff a couple of kids into, they were so big. And when we eventually were persuaded by advertising to get rid of this big fridge and go for the new slimline white, brand new rectangular looking fridge, at an enormous cost, well, we were sucked into that. I mean, most people were sucked into it. I'm not ashamed to say that. That was just how things were. So the fridge that we then, I think there was like an exchange thing where you bought a fridge, and when it was delivered they picked up the old fridge, something like that. Anyway, the fridge that we gave up was still in perfect working order. Lord knows how old it was at that point, but those fridges never seemed to die the death. They just kept going. Washing machines kept going. Don't think tumble dryers had come onto the market at that point, but everything kept going, and if it did break down, there was a repair shop, or a repairman came out and fixed it. And in fact, as I've said before on some video, most people actually rented their washing machine and rented their television, and if it broke down, the repairman came out and fixed it. I mean, we were far more ecologically sound then than what we are now, even though we're always patting ourselves on the back and saying, oh, we recycle. Yes, I recycle. Yes, that's my brown bin for that and my green bin for that, and look how great we are. But this morning, when I discovered my fairly young fridge, I mean, that fridge is hardly even a teenager, and it's broken, it's gone. I can't find anyone that I would know of who has the ability to fix it, because that's one of these newfangled fridges that people say, oh well, for what it would cost to have it fixed, you may as well just buy a new one. Well, I'm telling you this, I'm not buying a new fridge. I'm just going to do without a fridge now. I'm just going to do without a fridge. That's it. I am not going to buy another yoke, as they say in Ireland, for a piece of modern machinery. Can sometimes be called a yoke. I'm just not going to go down that route. And I was thinking to myself, okay, so how is this going to fit in then with my tea? Because I do love my tea. And I always have to have, some plant milk in it. Well, I was thinking about that. Because that's really the only thing that I would need to keep in the fridge. Because, again, let's be honest here. Let's put this out there for debate. Fridges are notorious dumping grounds. You buy stuff, you put it in the fridge, you forget about it for a day or two. You go back to the fridge and you think, oh, it's almost out of date, but you know, I'll just leave it there because I think I'll use it. And then you go back to the fridge again, you think, what's that funny smell? Something's gone off. Oh, I'll have to clear out the fridge. And so it's a case of stacking the fridge and clearing out the fridge. And I really only needed to store plant milk. There is one alternative if I'm not vegan, and that is dried milk, because you can get tubs of dried skim milk, which I remember my mother always using. But anyway, one thing is for sure, I am not buying into this damnable system of buying and throwing away. And you know, governments are quite aware of this, that manufacturers are manufacturing white goods that I have heard on the grapevine are programmed to break down at a certain point. In fact, I think I found a video somewhere up on YouTube about that, where this Russian guy actually found out that the printer he had, which had broken down, when he took it apart, had a little chip in it, which was, now, what is it referred to? A termination chip? Where basically, after so many print runs on the printer then just literally shut down, and it was deemed to be broken, unfixable. Anyway, interesting to hear thoughts on this. So, life without a fridge. We'll see how it goes. Blessings to everyone. And blessings on your fridges.